Hi guys, I'm Rachel and Ilford have asked me to do a lockdown sessions. Share your favourite image or print shot on Ilford film and tell us what it means to you. A print that I'd like to share with you, or a shot that I'd like to share with you, would be the image that got me a top 10 in the International Wedding Photographer of the Year Awards in 2018. I shot that on Ilford FP4+. The reason it's important to me is because I'd been having a really crap time actually with feeling like I wasn't good enough and that my work was rubbish and I had like no confidence in what I was doing at all. And I think that was and so in the end, entering the competition was a real kind of like, oh sod it kind of like moment. Just in case anyone doesn't know who you are or what you do, can you give us the overview? Okay, so the overview is, I'm Rachel, hi, and I run a business called Little Vintage Photography. I work across education, running workshops and tutorials and all sorts of different sessions, both publicly and privately. Work quite a lot with things like libraries, museums, community groups and individuals as well. I invented my analog adventurer kit, which was sort of taking one of the very traditional photographic processes of cyanotype. Basically a kit that people can build themselves. It's aimed really at children, 7+, and it was to sort of show them how to make a pinhole viewer so they could see what would be going on inside a film camera, and how magical that is really. Alongside my education work, I shoot weddings using a hybrid system. I wanted there to be something that was a bit different for the couples who are, a bit alternative or want something that's a bit more fine art. I also co-host the Sunny 16 podcast. How and why did you get started shooting film? So I grew up in the 80s, so I started shooting film because that's what we had. That was all we had at the time. My dad was in the RAF originally, and he taught me kind of when I was old enough, 3-ish, he decided that it was time enough for me to go and get into the darkroom and basically show me how to make a pinhole camera and take a photo. I left school at like 15 or 16 and went to art college, and I did my photography A-level. So in terms of formal education, that's the only bit of formal education that I've done. I got into shooting film again after unfortunately getting made redundant and losing my mum, and lots of other sort of upheaval in my life. This combined with my idea of, I love tactile, I love the sort of like fun of the chemistry and the darkroom, and I was like, okay, so film's the way to go. So that's how it kind of like came back to shooting film, was through that process really. Who has been your biggest photographic inspiration to date? Wow, that's a massive question. I suppose a huge part of my photographic inspiration came from a woman called Anna Atkins. She actually worked with one of the very early photographic processes called cyanotype, and that's basically creating in blue and white prints as opposed to black and white. It's a different chemical process, but it's still a chemical that you put onto a substance like paper or fabric and it reacts with UV light. So actually coming across her work and what she does what she did 170 years ago was pretty awesome. I'm a huge admirer, of course, of some of the female photographic pioneers who we have so much to be thankful for. Constance Talbot, people like Vivian Mayer, who's just beautiful, wonderful work and not known about, until later on. What's the best piece of photography advice or tip that you've ever received? Focus is a bourgeois concept. What photography related projects, if any, are you planning to do whilst in lockdown? Processing, scanning, printing, business planning, etc. Do you have any photography tips, ideas, projects for people to try? Okay, so yes, what I was planning to do was processing, scanning, printing, and business planning. What actually happened was quite different. I struggled with focusing on anything, with feeling at all creative. I found it difficult I always find it difficult anyway, to separate my love and passion for analog photography from the fact that it's also my work and my business. So my brain can just never switch off, and it's quite that can be quite exhausting. All these things that you feel like you should be doing and that you need to be doing, and that you're therefore not doing because you're feeling all of this pressure. And how to try and do that when you can't really focus properly because you're worried about the survival of your business and all these other things. Obviously with my weddings being postponed until next year, that's difficult. So yes, I really struggled at the beginning actually with feeling, all of these things were things that I wanted to do and wished that I could do. I could easily just sort of like pick up and carry on with, but the reality was quite different, and I found that was tough. So that's been a challenge, definitely. In terms of tips for, I think the question was tips for projects for people to try. Yes, so I recently launched my Patreon, which is patreon.com/littlevintagephotography. You can find me there. One of the first videos I'm going to put up as part of the Analog Academy is going to be looking at anthotypes. All you need are some ingredients, things that you can literally get from the shop, or even from your back garden if you've, from the leaves that you've got, or plants if you've got those around, that kind of thing, and daylight really. So that would be a good lockdown photography project, I think, to try. What key piece of advice would you give others to see them through staying motivated with their photography during the lockdown? I think the best piece of advice I can give you is to say, don't force it. Don't force yourself to go and do something. It will come back to you. Like, you, at some point, you will feel like, do you know what? I'd like to take a photo of that, and that's great, and that's fine. And I think probably the worst thing you can do, and I'm so guilty of this, is just putting all this pressure on yourself that you have to create, and that you have to do this when the whole world is upside down. Trying to actually feel like you can focus on anything. I don't know why I thought, I'd be able to do that. I just assumed I would, and it turns out I couldn't. And so I beat myself up over that a lot, and I didn't need to really. So don't put pressure on yourself. You will create, and you will make, and you will take photographs at some point again. And I suppose the other piece of advice is just, it doesn't need to be a big deal. So whatever you can find around you to spark a little bit of joy, as Mary Kondo would say, I think that seems like a good thing to take a photo of. Where is the first place that you will be shooting once this is over, and what kit will you take with you? Now that it's slightly lifted, it's meant that actually, for the first time in months, I actually got out of the house. I walked from my front door up the dual carriageway and went to our local park. And so that was the first thing that I was shooting after full lockdown being lifted slightly. And the kit I took with me was a new to me Olympus OM4T. So exciting. That's awesome. I think what I'd like to do once lockdown's completely lifted would be I'd love to just get back to the Lake District. I was supposed to be shooting weddings there this summer, all sorts of things, and I miss it, and I kind of try and go back once a year at least, just for a weekend or whatever I can really. It's sort of my little pilgrimage really. It's where I went when I very first started Little Vintage Photography in the first place, and I was making pinhole camera obscuras inside old barns and making pinhole photographs and processing them in, fish tank and all sorts of ridiculous stuff. So it's quite nice, like for me, that's where it sort of started with returning to film photography. So I like to go back there each year if I can and capture it. So once lockdown's fully lifted and we've got the opportunity to travel a bit further afield again, that's where I'd like to go. And I would take some HP5 Plus and some FP4 Plus with me, because I just absolutely love those two stocks that Ilford make. And I will put them probably in one of my Olympus cameras. This pandemic has given many people the opportunity to reassess goals and ambitions. When the world returns to normal, what are your photographic goals going forward? My dream has been to set up an online educational space, really. So I've just launched my Patreon, yay! So it's patreon.com/littlevintagephotography. And I basically created various different tiers there. And the idea is that I will be creating an analog academy, like a library of different videos showing what I do, different techniques and processes and all that kind of thing. And I'll put those there. I also wanted to create like virtual photo walk opportunities and things like that. So that's also going to be there. And one-to-one support too, because I realised that outside of formal education, there is not really that opportunity to have something that's one-to-one, where you've kind of got a mentorship, that kind of thing. So I wanted to offer the option for that as well. Post-coronavirus, what would you like the world to do differently? What lessons could we all take from this? I think the importance of supporting mental health. This has been so challenging for so many people in so many different ways, and people that you might not necessarily expect it to affect. I suppose what we should take from it is the fact that whatever any of us do, it's going to affect somebody else. Really, what I would love to see is, this feels to me like it's an opportunity in a way to reassess things like transport and how we move around, particularly in places like cities and things. And I've seen some fantastic ideas for places like Milan and what have you, coming out the other side of the pandemic, what we can do to make it a greener and more environmentally way, sort of like conscious way of living in general. If there could be some actual systems put in place to support that and to change how we look at those kinds of things going forward, I think that would be my biggest wish. Give it a shout out to your 3 favourite film photographers. This is way too hard for me to pick like three in total. So I'm going to just pick 3 who I want to mention now at this point. And I think it's important that they're all women. Yes. Give a shout out to your favourite photography YouTube channel apart from the Ilford Photo one. Of course, I would have mentioned the Ilford Photo one because we have had a lot of fun making the videos so far for Ilford Photo YouTube channel, and I can't wait until I'm able to get back into the darkroom when lockdown has lifted and we can finish filming the rest. But in the meantime, and obviously because I'm not able to say Ilford, I'm going to say Analog TV, which is the Analog Wonderland YouTube channel that was set up during lockdown happening, and how much I've enjoyed that on a Thursday evening. It's just been a real kind of like highlight of my week. I was lucky enough to be asked to go on and speak to them actually, which was a lot of fun. It's nice and light-hearted and it's just made me laugh a lot. So I think we've all needed that a bit. So there we go. Give a shout out to your favourite lab service if you have one. One that I will mention is Silver Pan Lab, and Duncan, who runs that, because again, he's a one-man band and doing a fantastic and vital service for the analogue photography community. So great work from Duncan at Silverpan Lab. Favourite kit? Ooh, exciting stuff. What is your favourite film camera you own or have owned? Send us a picture if you have one. Okay, well, actually, because I'm doing this as a video, I can show you, which is useful. I'm just going to move my phone and my cup of tea. I'm going to have to say my Olympus OM1 is one of my absolute favourite cameras. It's small, it's light, it's compact. It's the perfect sort of size for me as an analog photographer, and especially for things like I say as weddings and that, because it means I can get in, I'm nice and quick with it, and it just always feels and looks lovely, I think. So everything is where I need it to be, and I think that's really important. I'm gonna have to talk about my Hassie as well, because this was a dream camera for me to be able to get a hold of. My dad used to use them. He never owned one, but he did use these. I just have always wanted one. They're such a beautiful camera, and I just love what it's producing. So now I actually have a back that works for it. Yay, absolutely made up. Aside from your camera, lenses and film, what accessories make it into your camera bag? My phone, because I use this as my light meter quite often. A notebook, pen, penknife. Those would be probably the things that I would say I'd take. Oh, and a roll of electrical tape. Never know what's gonna fall off. As this is an Ilford interview, it would be remiss of us not to ask about your favourite Ilford products. Okay, tell us your favourite Ilford film, paper and chems, and why. Oh God, you guys don't want much, do you? Favourite Ilford film? Oh, it's either HP5 or it's FP4. Oh, it always changes. You see, I love Pan F too. Okay, I'm gonna say HP5 plus, sorry, because for my education side of things, I use it such a lot. It's just my work staple, you know, pretty much whatever you shoot, whatever you do to that film, you're still going to get an image, and I just think that is amazing. I can just use that Ilford product and know that it's gonna work. Chemistry, I tend to develop with ID11. You can dilute it down if you don't mind spending a little bit more time actually processing, so it can go really far, or you can do it as like one shot but reuse at stock, and I absolutely love it. It's never let me down. It's great. What was the other thing it asked us about? Paper. Oh, paper. I love how the warm tone paper works with the selenium toner, and that you can get such a rich kind of like colour from that. I think that combination is just beautiful, so I would say those two. Paper itself, it's so special. Using the Art 300 is just gorgeous, and it's just like having a photograph that looks like a drawing on this beautiful watercolour paper is kind of how it feels. So yeah, that's a really sort of like special product. Unfortunately, we've seen pictures from around the world of people stockpiling products such as toilet rolls, pasta, hand sanitizer, and so on. If you could stockpile one Ilford product, what would it be? Well, I wouldn't dream of stockpiling. What is the best piece of photography kit you have found or been gifted? Well, I would say Albert. This is Albert, and he is a large format wet plate collodion camera. Basically, he came from my friend Donna, who has kind of nothing to do with photography. She is just a creative person, and she said, "Oh, you like cameras?" And I found this in the loft. I think it was my granddad's, and she didn't want anything for it. She was just happy, basically said, I just wanted it to go to a good home. So I've given Albert a very good home. And the awesome John Brewer, who is the Victorian photographer, he created some new bellows for me as well, which is amazing. So I've been able to use Albert for lots of wet plate adventures, and I love him. He's amazing. Finally, nominate one other person you think should fill in this form, and we will reach out to them. So I'm going to nominate a lovely lady called Leah Elm. She's really talented as both a photographer and as a writer, And she's somebody who I've worked with in the past. She came and assisted for me at the photography show last year. And I just think she is somebody who would do a great job of answering these questions for Ilford as part of the lockdown sessions. So I'm going to nominate Leah. Wow, actually got to the end. Can you believe it? I can't quite believe that we managed to get there. So thanks so much for listening to me waffle on. It's been a lot of fun. It really has, talking to you guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Ilford, and hopefully speak to you soon. I think it's time for another cup of tea. Cheers.